Ah, time for another draftphysics.com, debatephysics.com, also video presentation. Oh, Brian Greene. Okay, so this is a 6-year-old video world science festival. Pretentious douchebags telling us what the truth is based on their complete misinterpretation of some of the simplest experiments in the world. What else is news, right? These are the brilliant physicists who can't figure out that gravity makes things hot, and therefore, unless you can put the heat back into the bent space, it's a incomplete theory. Yeah, it's an incomplete theory of thermodynamics. Can't even figure that part out. Okay, so we've been over this stuff before, and with the same character before, but they're just so arrogant, and it's just so obnoxious, and it really pisses me off. Anyway, I think I'll change the do a little pop-out window thing. Alright, should be ready. So I'll play the intro just because it's ironically funny. He's usually a little loud, so I'm going to turn him down a little bit. Alright, so yes, little balls, little particles. And why are they showing little particles?
Good to see all of you. You see a quote up there by Niels Bohr, one of the founding figures of quantum mechanics. Anyone who thinks they can talk about quantum mechanics without getting dizzy hasn't yet understood the first word of it.
Right. So Niels Bohr, in my opinion, was a religious kook. Okay, it just seems obvious. He wanted to religiousize, spiritualize, enhancelize, make life more meaningful, and all that kind of stuff with all this little wooey crap. And I don't know why he got to tell everybody else what reality is. This is like King David or something. They're just reinventing the religion. And we all have to believe what the Moses tells us is the truth. And it's just, oh, fuck. Sorry to use, I'm just so, this is such crap. These theories are crappy. They're crappy models. They don't work. They don't make any sense. They're self-contradictory, and they contradict all kinds of other things very quickly. But look at the image, right? This is all it's about. It's like we have to make the brain all quantum and everything all quantum, so we can make life into some sort of something other than a bug planet. I mean, that's the only purpose here. It is a religion.
Now, why would that be? What did Niels Bohr mean by that? Well,
that you have a silly, idiotic, nonsensical pile of rubbish theory and you're all going to bow to it. Yes, the totem pole looks like an emperor wearing no clothes, but let's go ahead and pray to it anyway.
Basically, he meant that we all have a good intuition.
Okay, that stinking, lousy, rotten, crappy word, intuition. Nobody in a conversation about science should be using the word intuition because, yes, of course, you're not supposed to be fooled by, the superficial appearances, book cover stuff. You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to jump to conclusions. You're supposed to be carefully stepping into this substance and trying to analyze what it is. You're not supposed to just run through it and say, oh, it was just water, when no, it was, water with a bunch of cyanide in it.
For classical physics, right? And by that...
So, and this stupid classical physics word keeps coming up, and again, they lie about... They can't even get the classical part right, which is stop right at Newton. No Leibniz, okay? No wavicles, no relativity, no... no kinetic energy, no squared velocities.
I mean, if I was to take any little object, right, give it a catch, nice, did a one-handed catch right there, throw this a little bit further back, and we go 2 for 2. No, we're 1 for 2. They're still back in the dark age. Here we go. You have that one over there.
It's like, this is like kindergarten. So this is science, this is physics, so I'm going to talk about the most difficult subject, and I'm going to throw little stuffies at people. Oh, so pathetic.
Good. Right now, each one of the people who caught, so that would be the two of you over here, is a really evolved human being. No, you see, when we were out there in the savannah.
Oh, this is how much they know about even evolution. Yeah, yeah, a mosquito. Yeah, I mean, junky little bugs, okay, can go find a way to get a meal. So yeah, they have tools, and catching things. I don't know. That's not really what the tool is for. It's for grabbing branches, you could argue. So it's probably something our hand-eye coordination probably has absolutely nothing to do with the savannah. That's not where we got it from. We got it when we were back in the trees. So we can't even get that story right.
Trying to survive.
Eating manure. It's a personal theory of mine that we were poo eaters. That's how we, got our our protein and our protein. That's how we got our enough energy out of grain to make us sustainable, because we were lousy hunters, and just a fact. And before fire, eating other animals was out of the question.
Right? We needed certain skills. We needed to be able to know where to throw a spear, how to throw a rock to get the next meal. We needed.
So that's not exactly how we got fed. So again, it's another fake story. Most of what we ate was stuff pounded out of something, beaten grains and whatnot. And so it's another fake story. They can't even get that right. I mean, this idiot thinks we really are carnivores, that we ran squirrels down and chewed off their fur with our massive teeth. yeah, I don't think so.
To dodge some animal that was running toward us, and therefore we
lost all of those contests, okay? Frankly, come on, get real. Lion running after human. Gee, who's going to win?
Learned the basic physics of the everyday macroscopic so-called classical world. We learned that intuitively.
Oh, it's just so disgusting. It has nothing to do with evolution. We didn't learn it. And we still, there's people who are incredibly uncoordinated, as your test just proved. Some people can't catch the stuffy, okay, because they haven't done enough practicing to, get it right. And this doesn't have anything to do with intuition. It's just a pile of crap, and it certainly doesn't have anything to do with the evolution of our understanding, which has absolutely nothing to do with any kind of genetic code.
And that's why when I throw an object, you don't have to go through some elaborate calculation to figure out the...
Yeah, you do, actually. That's right, because we've learned the calculation, okay? We've experienced it and practiced it. So it's just kind of silly. And it's not all that elaborate. The up goes down thing, and we have predicted it in the past. But to call muscle memory, to call that intuition, is really a stretch in vocabulary anyway. So the whole concept is just nonsense. This has nothing to do with having a conversation about why your theories have gotten silly and wooey. This isn't how you defend it.
Trajectory of that stuffed animal, you just put out your hand and catch it, right? It's built into our being. But
and the fact that push is perfectly rational, thing bangs into thing, okay, yeah, that I can understand. Pull, no, complete failure. And yet you think the pull is elemental, and you think the push is to be ignored or entirely exaggerated. Yeah, let's square the velocity for no rational reason. What exactly would a cube of velocity look like?
That's not...
Where's your intuition there? I mean, and our brains evolved, so now we can cube of velocity and completely understand. Oh, yes, there's a cube of velocity. Don't you perfectly understand why you would cube a velocity? I mean, velocities are always Well, yeah, they're straight lines, and and they can't be in different directions.
Not the case when we go beyond the world of the everyday. If we explore the world, say, of the very small, which is what we're going to focus on here tonight.
This is like Captain Kirk's retarded brother.
Tonight, we don't have experience in that domain. We don't have intuition in that domain. And in fact, were it the case that any of our distant brethren way in the past, if they did have some...
So this is just such crap. Again, this has nothing to do with the subject. You're talking about us being able to becoming sophisticated enough to understand what drafting is and what modeling is, and understanding that that's all we're trying to do with this part of the universe we can't see. So we see some symptoms of it, and we're trying to fill in the dots of how the mechanism could have this as an input and that as an output. And you're trying to do that carefully and reasonably and logically, contained within the context of all the other things you've declared to be a fact. And that's how screwed up everything they're talking about is that, just as I pointed out in the last video with the atom jiggling, the electron jiggling. Somehow the electron is jiggling while it's going 456,000 meters per second, zooming around two different atomic nucleuses. Yeah, I don't think so.
Quantum mechanical knowledge, and they sat down to think about electrons and probability waves and wave functions and
so they didn't do any of that until the last 10 years or whatever, when they started making up this horse shit. So again, none of this was a fact when I was a kid. It was all just kind of speculation, and now they've declared it all facts, and it's not
things of that sort. They got eaten. Their genes didn't propagate.
See, too silly. So intelligence has something to do with genes. So, there is a little, there's a component of ethnic pride or something in all of this crap that's a little bit irritating.
Right? And therefore, we have to use the power of mathematics and experiment.
No, bullshit. The power of mathematics. It's geometry is the only part you need to understand anything about it, is just understanding vectors with momentum, because that's all there is. There's just something moving in the universe, and it's going to interact with something else. Its movement is going to force there to be an input and an output. And that's all that's happening in the universe, is things colliding and interacting.
An observation to peer.
So, peer and make up a whole bunch of silly explanations for the simplest of possible things. It's like you're seeing mist come off of the water that hits the rocks at the bottom of the waterfall. And they're saying, they're making up this bizarre, the Keebler elves actually, as a side job to make a few extra bucks, actually shovel water into the air at the bottom of a waterfall. I mean, didn't you know that? The Keebler elves do that? And then they subcontract the work to Smurfs, and that's the water that looks blue and creates rainbows. That's the water the Smurfs are shoveling. Shit. Alright, back. He's a Savannah Minky.
Deeper into the true nature of reality when things are beyond our direct sensory experience.
Right. So again, it's just, yes, there's some things that just become obvious. Okay, you can't walk through a tree. So some stuff it's really easy to learn because it's big stuff and we're big stuff and all of that. And then the tricky part is when it gets smaller and smaller. And frankly, you go back in history and you just wonder, there was a whole bunch of people that didn't want to believe, doctors who didn't want to believe in microbes. And, Pasteur had a whole big problem trying to convince doctors. Hard to convince doctors that, you have to wash your hands because they're covered with all kinds of really nasty shit. and you're just infecting your patients and killing them. And that was an argument you had to make. So yeah, it's just clear that humans aren't too good at logic.
And that's what quantum mechanics is all about.
It's all about selling woo to idiots, and making the idiots think it's really important, and really it's way too difficult for them to understand. So just trust us. We're the navigators of the truth. We're gonna fly the the whatever it is, the truth glider, through the cosmos, and crash into Pluto. Because we don't think it's a planet.
It's trying to describe what happens in the micro world.
I mean, everything's a moon, right? I mean, technically, everything is a moon of something, right? So, there aren't any planets. There's just moons with moons.
World in a way that's both accurate and revealing.
No, I don't think it'll be accurate or whatever revealing is. And the thing you're revealing is that you're all religious kooks, that you gravitate towards silly and imbecilically nonsensical, abstract, crappy, gooey, mushy, girly nonsense, and that you have just no appreciation at all for anything clean and straight. You want everything bent and crooked and perverse. Perversiverse. That's what they're the perversiverse.
And the thing to bear in mind is, even though our focus here tonight...
Oh, whatever. This whole show is built around selling this absolute pile of shit to a bunch of morons and just stealing their pennies.
Will really, in some sense, be in the micro world, the world of particles.
Yeah, but it really goes all the way down and all the way up. The woo is down there and it's floating up. We don't see any of it here. And then there's a bunch of it out there. So, woo at the bottom, woo at the top, and we are the non-woo middle.
Particles. We are all collections of particles. So any weirdness that we find down there...
Yeah, it's all... You have weirdness. Don't despair, because you have weirdness on your side. You're not a determined robot just mimicking... memes and and tendencies and bad habits and historical trajectories. No, you're a wooer, a woo, woo-human. Yeah, you're a woo-human.
In the micro world, in some...
It's just a religion. It's just a frickin' religion.
some sense, it has an impact even in...
Yes, it makes us so wonderful.
the macro world, and maybe suppressed as we'll discuss, but it's not like there's a sharp divide between the small and the big. We are big beings made of a lot of small things, so any weirdness about the small stuff really does apply to us as well.
Yes, that doesn't even logical, right? The whole argument is that all that special stuff can't leak into this world. That's the whole reason why we can't capitalize on any of it. It's because somehow it's only in that frickin' material existence of these very small things, and therefore it will never percolate into this reality that we exist in. It'll never affect the robots. So it's like saying you could make the Coke machine out of something that was radioactive, but the decay rate is, whatever, 10 bazillion years or something. One atom every 10 bazillion years. So it would be irrelevant.
And in this journey into the micro...
Oh, into the journey. You're going to journey through our wonderful pile of crap that we drew with our crayons and our mathematics. And it's completely nonsensical, and our fearless leader says, if you understand it, you're an idiot. Yeah, that's our motto. If you understand it, you're an idiot.
The world of quantum mechanics, we have some of the world-leading experts to help us along to figure things out, and let me now...
Yes, fellow babblers. So I'll skip through the intros of all these I don't know, eccentric people. They're all eccentric people. So you have to be pretty eccentric, to put on your bishop hat and carry your little smoking urn. You have to be a little bit of a whack job to say I'm going to take a part in that pageant. And these are all people willing to take a part in the pageant. Pantomime science. All right, so we're done with the introductions. So it's weird douchebag guy, weird woman guy, somebody else, and Gerard Tooth. So he won the Nobel Prize, and I never even heard his name. But he's the most brilliant scientist. That's how he was described. The most brilliant. I don't think so. Standard model. So anybody has anything to do with the standard model, that's just crap. Gluons. Yes, it shoots its tongue out, grabs the proton with its gluey tongue, and then pulls it in. Yes.
All right, so the subject is quantum mechanics, and part of the evening will
Crap mechanics.
involve some challenge to the conventional thinking about quantum mechanics.
So there won't be any challenge beyond them saying something silly like, oh, there's a measurement problem. But they won't even talk about the real measurement problem, which is everything is in the universe getting hit by stuff constantly. The forces everywhere, things flying through you right now. There's even old TV shows still bouncing between mountains probably that's still hitting you. There's all kinds of stuff still hitting you. There is no such thing as some sort of quiet place where you can go be entangled. You're always getting photographed by somebody's camera, so to speak.
And so before we get into the details, I thought I would just sort of take your temperature, get a sense of where you stand.
We're heading for the two slit experiment, so I'm just giving you fair warning that that's mostly what I'm going to talk about and I'm just going to demonstrate again that this sturt simple experiment, they can't accurately describe it ever. And it's so simple, and yet you people trust them on all these really complicated experiments, and you trust what they say is happening in those experiments when they can't explain something almost as simple as throwing a dart as a dartboard. It's so frickin' simple, and they can't honestly describe that simple experiment and what actually happens.
And on quantum mechanics, is it in your mind a done deal? It's finished, we completely understand it. Is it a provisional theory? Is it something which 100 years from now we're going to look back on with a quaint smile?
Well, we get the point.
How do they think that that's how things work? So David, you're...
Yeah, so, obviously the future's going to know better than these morons. And again, it's just going to demonstrate how disgracefully corrupt human intelligence is, in the sense that people can't get past their personal little biases, and they have to pervert everything they get involved in. They have to cheat and thieve and steal to their advantage, because they can never really understand they have a responsibility to the human race, not to be a dishonest thief.
Well, I did think we fully understand.
So this guy, I'm sorry, there's just no way not to react to his eccentricness. I mean, this is like Pee Wee Herman doing physics. I mean, you're like, I'm supposed to laugh, right? Oh, it's not funny? Oh, shit.
It yet. I think it has a lot of depths left to plumb, and who knows, it might turn out to be replaced, but right at the minute, I think we don't have either empirical or theoretical reason to think that anything will take its place.
Yes, except for something much better and simpler and logical. So, yes. Okay, I don't think anything will take its place because I don't do logic, and I don't worry about things being sensible and reasonable.
Good. Brigitte.
I think it's here to stay.
Rakita, something like that.
There may be modifications.
Here to stay, you said.
They're
Yes.
here to stay. There may be extensions and modifications. There may be something more complete, but this will stay.
They're kind of like reversing roles here. If you mix the two of them together, you get girl boy, but anyway.
Will be part of it.
Okay. Mark.
Yeah, so there's a frontier in quantum mechanics that I work.
So this guy's going to try to be, well, I'm going to hedge my bet a little bit. It's just it's very good for drawing all and using up a lot of paper in the old days. And now we are, using up lots of computer bit rate, doing lots of calculations about things that no one gives a shit about. And, calculating the calculation of the calculator. How does the calculator calculate the calculation? And we have calculated how the calculator calculates the calculation. And so it's tremendously lots of jobs and all kinds of stuff calculating how the calculator calculates the calculation.
Work in, and this is the frontier. It's like the wild west of theoretical physics.
Yeah, so he's somebody who's working on qubits. I'm a qubit. I'm not really an on or an off. I'm just a qubit. But know what my special powers are? You don't even have to ask me the question, and I give you the answer. Yeah.
Where we're trying to combine quantum mechanics and gravity, and we need to do that to understand black holes and hopefully.
Oh, just understand black holes. Why do you even have to understand it? Why? They're so curious about how a black hole works, and they're not very curious how, I don't know, something more relevant, viruses work or something. So we're doing all of this billions of dollars to study this stupid black hole crap. What the fuck does it have to do with us? It's such an abstraction and it's such a pointless thing. So you're just saying, okay, there's blobs of gravity in the universe. Why do we have to know what's causing the blob of gravity, right? When the logical answer is just to say, well, it must have eaten a lot of mass. But see, what they're going to turn into is the singularity. They're not just talking about some kind of heavy thing in the universe with massive gravity. No, they're talking about, all the matter is in one single location. Why would somebody think matter can do that?
Eventually understand the Big Bang, and there's a lot to do.
Oh yes, who could care? What frickin' rational person could care about this crap? This is like counting how many grains of sand are in the dirt in your garden. I don't need to know.
And we don't know if we're going to have to modify quantum mechanics or it'll all be the same quantum mechanics.
Oh, we might have to kill Einstein or kill Einstein.
But,
All the way down.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, Gerard, you have unusual views.
Oh, I guess he's the one who's going to say, no, he's not going to say it. So this is the Nobel Prize winner. Ugh, fuck. I'll be back. Alright, should be continuing.
Well, yes, I could spend the rest of the evening explaining them.
Yes.
But to my mind, quantum mechanics is a tool, a very important mathematical tool.
So it's just, yuck. So it's, we'll just make up a bunch of nonsense about some elemental thing, and through all of our nonsense, it'll be a really simple little fix. So it's almost like Einstein's field equations for doing this little change in Mercury's orbit, because there could be as simple as the fact that the sun's center of gravity wobbles a little. So the wobble's felt by Mercury because it's extremely close to the sun, and it isn't felt by anything else because everything's inverse square law. So any wobble in the sun, inverse square law, we don't feel it. Mercury does. Simple explanation. Now let's have a really complicated one instead. That's all that's happening here.
To calculate what happens if you have some underlying equations and to telling us how particles and other small things behave.
Now we have equations that tell us about the equations. Oh, that's circular, isn't it? Are we supposed to do reality? Oh, I didn't know. Sorry. Sorry, I'm on the wrong page.
We know the answer to that question. The answer is quantum mechanics, but we don't know the question.
Oh, we don't know the question. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. The answer is quantum mechanics. Doesn't matter what the question is. How far is the stick up my ass? Quantum mechanics.
That's still something that you have to figure out.
Good. So it's sort of a Jeopardy issue, if you know the
Exactly.
American reference. All right. So
So something as the answer is. The question was.
just a quick overview. We're going to start with some of the basics of quantum mechanics.
I got a picture of a black hole, or I don't know, like an eclipse. I don't even know what the fuck that is. An eclipse, I guess.
To sort of make sure that all of us are more or less on the same page. We'll then turn to a section on something called the quantum measurement problem, something weird, quantum entanglement, as in the title of the program. We'll then turn to issues of black holes, space-time,
We'll touch all of your little special subjects.
and quantum computation, which will take us right through to the end. All right, so just to get to the basics.
And this moron is a string theorist, so, Jesus. Okay, I'll try to endeavor to persevere.
Of quantum mechanics. The story, of course, began more.
So this is their model of an atom, and it's garbage, right? Because now they're saying, no, it's just doing this over here somehow. Somehow it's mostly over here. And it's only a little bit over. No, it's not over there ever. It's always mostly over here. So their new model isn't even this model, and it's certainly, what's this black hole-y looking thing? They're saying the nucleus has an event horizon or something. I mean, the whole thing is just so ridiculous. I just can't believe you people eat this crap. I mean, yeah, the savannah humans, I think, they just followed herds and made hamburgers out of their manure. And I think you're still eating poo. Continuing.
More or less in the way that I started. We understood the world using classical physics in the early days, way back to the 1600s. And then something happened in the early part of the 20th century where people like...
So it already happened. All right, so we know that it already happened with the dispute between Huygens and Newton over waves and particles. And it just extended with their argument about squaring velocities, the invention of mv squared rather than just the simple idea of quantity of motion. Momentum runs the universe. Always got good answers. There was no reason to fix it because it wasn't in any way broken, and yet they decided to fix it because it was wooey. And it was called the living force. And so I guess that's why it meant something to people. It's because they gave it a stupid name. It sounds more fun than momentum, I guess. That's all it's about. Some stupid thing like that. Because they really had no evidence. No reason to believe. It took 25 times the fuel to go 5 times as fast. Or that something going 5 times as fast could do 25 times the damage. 5 times the damage is a lot. 25 times the damage is silly.
We started with Newton, of course, then we move on to people like Max Planck.
He did look a little like me, frankly.
Albert Einstein. What drove the initial move?
So they show Newton in the context of Planck and Einstein, a completely different physics. That has nothing to do with, they're not even close to the same thing. And Newton made his argument against relativity pretty explicit and I think pretty rationally with the whole bucket experiment. And they really don't have a good explanation. They don't have a good argument saying, no, you're wrong. They don't have a good argument.
Into quantum physics. David?
I think it was really just pushing really hard at classical mechanics as it went down into the scale.
So they never pushed really hard. They didn't do a single frickin' experiment. They didn't crash cars. They didn't drop 4 pounds from 1 foot and 1 pound from 4 feet. They did 0 experiments.
Scale of atoms and the structure of atoms, and just finding that structure snapped and broke.
So it didn't do any of these things. So that's all just bullshit.
That trying to use classical mechanics to understand how hot things got or how
and how did it fail? So again, they're not going to be able to show you how hot things got. again, it's just an argument about momentum again. The momentum. Heat is just momentum. You have to make heat by using something's momentum. Every example of how heat is created, it's because something's momentum is being consumed. Rubbing your fingers together. It doesn't matter how you make the heat. The heat comes from something with momentum.
Electrons went round atoms without collapsing into the nucleus.
So again, this whole idea that somehow they would collapse into the nucleus, but not if we say they have special orbital levels that where they don't collapse for some special reason for which we have no explanation. So they just invent fake solutions to problems that were fake in the first place. This fake problem that somehow electrons run out of energy because they're doing work by spinning around something. The Earth spinning around the sun is not doing work. The Earth doesn't need a motor to do it. I mean, it's all such garbage.
Yes.
But I'm not defending the orbital model of atoms at all. They're magnetic. The magnetic model works. Electrons have positions. Protons have positions. They have positions that allow them to have a balance in their the forces attracting and repelling.
All those places we had a series of hints that something was amiss.
So there was no series of hints. This is all just nonsense. If you go through all of the 1700s and 1800s, you won't find anything reasonable on the subject of anything. There's no good physics. There just isn't any.
In our classical physics.
Yes.
And it took, I guess, most of 30 years for those hints to coalesce into a coherent theory. But that coherent theory then...
And it's not coherent in any way. The originator of it says, if you think you understand it, you're a frickin' lunatic.
Became not really just a single physical theory, but a language for writing physical theories, be it the theories of particles or fields, maybe...
Oh, I'm sorry about this part. They're going to get to the double slit eventually. Oh, this is silly gibberish.
And even gravity, and that language was more or less sort of solid by, I guess, about 1930.
Yep. And it's
So, and again, all that language has all this entanglement woo, all this spooky action, all this bullshit in it that they didn't even bother teaching when I was a kid, frankly. They didn't waste time on that nonsense.
It's actually quite remarkable that it only took that number of years to develop a radically new way of thinking about things. And
it's not thinking, though. It's not even rash. It's not even. There's nothing. Again, the originator of it says it's incomprehensible goo. He's saying you can't. If it doesn't bug the fuck out of you, it doesn't make your brain want to throw up. Then you're not doing it right, because it's nonsense.
Richard Feynman, who is, of course, a hero of all of us, also known to the public.
So just disgusting, a hero. You know, who molested his students. Hero. Sorry, but I mean, it is a kind of a molestation, you know, taking advantage of your position.
Famously said that there was one experiment. We could go through the whole history of everything that you described with the ultraviolet catastrophe and photoelectric effect and all these beautiful...
Yeah, all those things are saying your theory of wooey waves is nonsense. So all of those things are basically saying those were all solved by a nice rational theory. And so that's not the origin of your quantum mechanics. This nonsense, this misinterpretation of one of the simplest experiments in physics, that's where you got it from. A silly misinterpretation.
Experiments. But the double slit experiment, luckily for us in having a relatively brief conversation, allows us to get to the heart of the...
So this is a reaction of electrons by a crystal. So it's diffraction of electrons by a crystal of nickel. So there was no slits. They just shot electrons at a piece of shiny nickel, okay, non-oxidized. And so the crystals were very clean, all right. And so they're layers of crystal, and you're shooting, you know, electrons. And yes, the electrons are going to bounce off different levels of the lattice. And they're calling that a double slit experiment. So here it is again. I mean, what was the other video where they did the same thing, right? The Benghazi guy, whatever the hell his name is. What was his name? Doesn't really matter. Anyway, Al-Kahari. Is that his name? Yeah. Something like that anyway. He said exactly the same thing. It's just like. So he's saying this is a double slit experiment. There's no slits. And it's an electron. Electrons are charged. They're of course going to react to the metal. They're going to react to the surface you're throwing them at. He said, how do you compare this to photons? It's ridiculous. All right. Where was I? Oh, hit the button here. Okay. No two-slit experiment here.
This new idea, where it came from. This actually is the paper.
So, work. A liquid bottle exploded. The experimental tube by inrushing air. The oxide, blah, 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 removed by vaporation and high temperature. So, their metal oxidized because their thing broke, the vacuum broke, bottle. Their nickel oxidized, so they cleaned it, okay, by heating it.
On, in some sense, the double slit experiment, the first version.
So in some sense, the double slit experiment has nothing to do with any double slits at all. There won't be a double slit anywhere in this text, anywhere in the experiment. It's just absolute bullshit.
Davison and Germer. And I'll draw your attention to one thing. You see the word accident? And this is just a footnote, but in the old days, people would actually describe the blind alleys that they went down in a scientific paper, but as...
Yeah. So it goes back to Faraday, and he went, and he just happened to see that when he disconnected the wire, so connecting it, he didn't notice. But when he disconnected, he noticed. Oh, but this is such a perversion, a distortion of reality to claim that this electron experiment has something to do with the photon experiment. That it's somehow a double slit experiment. They didn't call it a triple slit or a fifth. How do you know what layers of the crystal the thing's bouncing off of? I mean, it's ridiculous. All right, should be back.
Science progressed, we were kind of taught, no, don't ever say what went wrong. Only talk about what went right. But here is an old paper, and indeed this experiment emerged from an accident in the laboratory at Bell Labs. They were doing a version of this experiment. They turned the intensity up too high. Some glass tube shattered, and when they redid the experiment, unwittingly, they had changed the experiment to something that was actually far more interesting than the experiment that they were initially carrying out. So just to talk about what this experiment is in modern language. So David, again, what's the basic idea of the double slit experiment?
So again, their reference to the experiment has nothing to do with slits, nothing to do with any. It doesn't even create the total bar thing. It just means that the faster you shoot the electron in, it reflects at different angles. So it really has nothing to do with the double slit.
So you take a source of, the particles of any kind, but let it be light, for instance.
Oh, so okay, particle of any kind. So again, they keep implying that all particles behave exactly the same, and it's just a lie.
You shine that light as a narrow beam on a screen. It has two gaps in it. And you look at the pattern of light behind the two gaps in the screen.
Oh, brother, he's a little bit affected. Anyway, just... Anyway, it's fine. I'm just saying it is distracting. Just a fact. I mean, if I was going blah, 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 every now and then I just went blah, 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 blah. I was talking and I blah, 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 blah. It'd be distracting. It'd be distracting. It would be distracting if I was doing a lot of this kind of thing in the middle of the video. You'd be distracted.
For the two slits, exactly,
yeah.
So the slits are just literally gaps in a black sheet of paper, in principle. The light's going through. If light...
See, okay, like again, very simple experiment, right? We with lasers, you don't even have to do the first thing of culminating the light and all that kind of stuff. Just shoot it at a needle. I could do it right here. I could shoot a laser, a little needle, bingo, pattern. Okay, lots of bars too, maybe 20, 40, with just a single needle, with just two surfaces.
Is a particle, you'd expect one sort of result on the far side of the screen.
So let's understand the slits are infinitesimally small and they're very, very close together. And their argument is when you project them, they somehow spread, which they don't do. That doesn't happen. See how distracting that is? Anyway, now I'm doing voices. Falsettoing. I'm falsettoing. Anyway, yeah, so the pattern would be a millimeter away. There's no... All light ends up spreading a little bit because all light that you project ends up being connected to some kind of surface that fucks it up a little bit. But theoretically, if the light was going parallel, you don't get two big bars separated by space. You get two little tiny bars inside of a millimeter on the screen. And so they never described the experiment accurately. The light from the light that goes straight through the slits doesn't end up going. It just ends up in that little tiny space, especially with a laser.
Light is a wave, you might expect something different, as the light coming through one part of the slit interferes with the light going through the other part of the slit. And the weird thing about the quantum two-slit experiment is...
So this is a horrible explanation.
That it seems in various ways to be doing both of those things at the same time.
Good. So...
Both of what things? Did he explain any of it? No, he didn't even touch the water wave thing, but now we're going to get to that. But it's just, that was terrible.
Brigitte, if you can just take us through a particle experiment to build up our intuition. So let's build
up our intuition, which will just be another... These are physicists, and they don't know that lasers basically go pretty straight. Yes, they get a little bit bigger with distance, but, 10 feet, it's not going to be that big a spread of a laser beam. So the fact is that your two little slits, if it was particles, are just going to be within 1 millimeter.
We carried out the experiment that David described, but we don't start with photons or electrons. We start with bullets or something. So I think we have a little animation that you could take us through. So what would we expect to happen in this experiment?
Well, so you have the source of the pellets here in front, and it's spitting out the pellets, and some of them are...
So we know that if you actually did this experiment, some of them are going to glance off the sides of the slits. It's actually going to happen. Some of them are going to glance, okay? But the trick is in photons, they can deflect both ways because they're hitting electrons. There is no surface for electrons. Electrons don't see a surface. Are photons. Photons don't see a surface. They see a sea of electrons. And when they go into that sea of electrons, they hit some of them, give them momentum, cause a new photon, a new element of a photon to be created. So the energy continues in this direction, but because the electrons had their own momentum, the directions have now changed, and it's going to be scattered. So scatter is an understood concept. We know that the surface isn't a flat surface in the world of electrons and photons. There's no flat surface here. And the surface is going to be an obstacle course. And what goes in doesn't come out exactly the same on the other side, so you're going to scatter it. And the math acknowledges the point, because all the math that predicts this pattern correctly only measures distances between surfaces. The surfaces are what's causing the effect. They are going to be the new point source, the new source of light that creates all the fringe light. All the fringe light is going to be sourced at one of the surfaces.
Go through the holes, and the ones that go through the hole, they sort of travel rectilinear, straight ahead, as we might expect from...
Why would you call straight ahead rectilinear? Why would you call anything rectal? Let alone, whatever the second word is. But why start with rectal?
our classical intuition, and we get two bands at the back indicating the pellets that went
Right, and so if you did it with photons with slits that are less than a millimeter apart, then you wouldn't see the pattern because it would be so damn small.
through the right slit on the right, and the left band is the pellets that went through the left slit.
Now, if I was, that's completely intuitive, right?
So it isn't any of these things. You already know stuff can get deflected. We all know this. You could throw something through a tree, and you know it ain't going to come out the same way you threw it, right? So you know, this isn't that hard to surmise that the surfaces might screw something up. It's not hard to imagine. And again, Newton did these experiments. That's the big joke, right? We didn't need Young 150 years later, because Newton had already done the aperture. He'd already done the aperture, okay, smaller and smaller aperture, more and more rings, all that stuff. Well, fewer and fewer rings, bigger and bigger rings. And so he did the slits, and he did the single surface, and that's what you're really just saying. The double slit is just a combination of, surfaces, an impediment, and a single slit. So it's like an opening with an impediment. It's just combining the two experiments. But he'd already done this. He'd already seen the pattern, and he didn't have an immediate explanation for it besides saying, gee, something's screwing up the photons.
This is the stuff that our forebears would have known even on the savannah, right? Now, if we took the size of the pellets and we dial them down to a very
I hate this dialing down rhetoric.
small size, before going to your quantum...
So if you do that, the surfaces aren't going to be surfaces anymore. So if you dial it down, guess what you have to do? You have to dial up the roughness of the surface, the unevenness of it, and you have to start showing that parts of it are jiggling because it's all, at some thermal temperature. It's all above 0 Kelvin. So everything's moving on that surface. So if they dialed it up right, if they did their dial down thing where, yes, the particles got smaller, but the surface got weirder, then all of a sudden this isn't so hard to figure out, is it? If all of a sudden you saw that surface getting all kinds of wacky and doing all kinds of moving in and out, then it wouldn't be so hard to figure out why the balls you're throwing through are getting kicked this way and kicked that way.
Intuition that you have, what would you expect now?
So he's intuition again, intuition. So if they did a little bit of science, they could figure out, yes, if I'm going to dial down the particle, then I have to dial up the surface of the slit. I have to show you what that surface actually looks like. And it doesn't look anything like a flat surface anymore.
Naively to happen if you simply dial down the size. Would you expect there to be anything different if you were... this is a leading question, by the way. So just follow me here. The answer is... would you expect anything different? Would you expect
would you expect anything different? And the simple answer is, of course, you would expect that surface no longer to be some kind of flat, smooth thing. Because it's made out of lumpy atoms.
Anything different? No, not at all. Good. So
Naively not.
Naively not, exactly right. So here's what you would naively expect would happen. Again, you've got the particles going through the two slits. So Mark, tell us what actually does happen. Not that I don't...
It's just hard to believe that probably ahead of this show they were all told what their little roles are going to be, and you're going to explain this part, and you're going to do that part, and this is the best they could frickin' do. This kindergarten lesson where they haven't got a single fact right.
I think Brigitte could, just to give us all a little airtime.
So of course it's kind of wild. The place where you would least expect to see something on that screen is exactly behind that big barrier that's in the middle.
Yep.
And somehow, when you actually do the experiment, you see that actually that's where most of the particles end up.
So in the double slit, I don't even think that's not even true, in the sense that it's not behind, because again, you have to remember the slits are so tiny. They're tiny.
So it's
also,
almost exactly the opposite, and then you get this weird pattern.
So this is, look what they did it again. You get this weird pattern that's a complete lie. Now, first off, anyone who's seen any of these patterns knows the light bands are much larger than the dark bands, not the other way around. So why can't they even, if they're going to illustrate it wrong, they should at least illustrate it wrong right? I mean, it should have some connection to the real pattern. And so the real pattern, the light bands are like 80% and the dark bands are 20%. And I guess I'll have to just once again draw the reality. So I'll be back when I draw the reality. Alright, so I was able to add it down there, so I did. So the top image is a traditional single slit, and there can be 70 of those little bars. I mean, there can be a lot of them. So it's not, you could have 70 little bars depending on how wide you make the slit. So the wider you make the slit, the more wavelengths fit in between the two surfaces, and all that really means is you can draw more lines from the two surfaces, okay, where you have a full wavelength of difference in the triangle lines. So it just tells you exactly how many bars there can possibly be. So twice the number actually, but you just do 90 degrees and then you just double it for both sides. And it tells you exactly how many bars there'll be by just figuring out how much distance there is between the two headlights. You're just trying to figure out, like if you had a red one and a blue one, you're trying to figure out where the red and blue are at the same wavelength, and it comes out purple kind of a thing. And so the same phase. And and that's what produces the pattern, but it's a rich pattern full of lots of bars for the single slit. And the distinctive feature for the double slit is the fact that it's broken into two patterns. One pattern looking like a single slit, the envelope they call it, and the other pattern being much more discrete, smaller bars that are inside of that pattern. And the simple truth is, if you take the widest distance, here's your double slit barrier here, this widest distance tells you exactly how big those little bars are going to be, and the smallest distance, this or this, will tell you what that envelope will be. That's the truth of it. It's all about the surfaces. The surfaces dictate where the pattern will be. The surfaces are causing the effect. They are the source of the effect. All of the fringe light can be accounted for as photons that went by a surface. If they were to use a wave theory, they have to put 4 waves on the surfaces. So on each surface it'd be a wave, a wave, a wave. So the double slit is the 4 surface of the 4 source experiment. The single slit is the 2 source experiment, and the one that comes out almost the same way is the single impediment, which is again the 2 source experiment. That's an accurate description of this simple experiment, and everything they say is inaccurate, deceptive, propaganda, distortion, perversion. It has nothing to do with the actual experiment and what it actually produces. Okay, just making it clear. I mean, if it isn't lying, it's as close as you can get without being lying.
Pattern with other bands going out, and so you initially would stare at it and shake your head.
So yes, you'd initially lie about what it looks like. So I'm just saying, the single, look at the double maxima in the center. The center node is twice the size, and you know it's exactly twice the size because every time in the double slit it comes out to be an odd number here. So it's going to be 3, 5, 7. It'll always be an odd number, and it'll be add 1 to that number, and that would equal 2 nodes. So the nodes are always half plus 1. And because what it really is you're just taking 2 of these 3s and overlapping them, and that's the center. I mean, so they're nowhere even close to the truth. They just talk this wacky crap. They can't explain one of the simplest experiments in physics. They can't honestly describe it. They can't accurately describe it, and you trust them. regarding all these much more complicated experiments, what they're really measuring, you know, you're fools.
And
Yeah.
You're dupes to let these people tell you what reality is.
wonder what you'd
So
actually
Will,
defend.
Why didn't you, why don't you ask these questions? Why didn't you wonder about this a little bit? They're giving you these extraordinarily bizarre answers to simple questions, and you just ate it up.
we'll analyze what that means in just a moment. But we often, I don't know, probably most everyone in this audience has seen a still image or an animation like this.
So you don't see that. So again, if I Googled it and show you the Google page, right, you'd see the real, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see all kinds of images of these things that look like this, little bars, and hundreds of them in some cases, well, at least 100. And it gets progressively weaker as it goes further out, which is, again, their theories. It's a wave theory. The wave theory doesn't say that should happen. They have no explanation. So they can't account for the double maxima. They can't account for the fact that the pattern seems to die out. There's a limited amount of deflection that's possible, apparently, but it shouldn't be. Because if it was waves, the waves are just as far. Over here, it's the same intensity all the way around. There shouldn't be more intensity in that double maxima sometimes is 90% of the energy. That's not consistent with their wave theory. So they just keep talking this crap
In the discussion of quantum.
and getting away with it. And you people are, you're sitting here calling me the bad guy. Why? Because I'm pointing out how they're distorting the truth and perverting it, and that's good science. I'm doing bad science. They're doing good science. Fuck.
Mechanics. And I thought it would be kind of nice to show that this actually happens. It's not just animation that an artist does.
Yeah, it is just crap. Now he's going to do the experiment and come up with a pattern I've never even seen before. I have no idea how they could possibly pervert such a simple experiment. I mean, I've done it myself 100 times. Lots of other people have done it. Even the Brozo he's done really nice patterns. To use very precise slits, got very clean patterns. It ain't going to look nothing like this that he's going to show.
So we're going to actually do the double slit experiment for real right now. And to do that, I'm going to invite a friend of mine from Princeton.
I mean, it's such a simple experiment. You can even buy the little things to shoot the light through, pre-manufactured slits. And all you need is a laser pointer. I mean, what is this? We're going to actually do. Yeah, so what? Really, people have literally done this, shown a reasonable pattern by cutting a piece of paper and shining a flashlight through it.
University. Omalon, can you wheel out, if you would, the double slit experiment?
So maybe I'll have to enlarge this. I couldn't tell what the hell they were doing.
All right,
when I
so
was listening.
what we have here
He has to carry his water with him.
is a laser on this far side. So this is our source. So actually we're doing this in some sense opposite to the orientation that we saw in the animation.
Opposite to the orientation. So all right, so instead they're looking into the slit. So again, what they're doing is they're looking in. So they're not looking at the they're not going to see any of the bars going out. They're just going to see the bars going in. So they're doing this part of the experiment, the part that's going inside of that little 1 millimeter. The two lines, the vectors that you're doing, the entire fringe pattern is created by vectors going the same direction. They're doing the vectors that are going opposite directions, and all of those vectors are inside of less than 1 millimeter. It's just amazing that, that's the two-slit experiment. So yes, it is nothing like what he's tried to show on the screen. It's not the same experiment, really. It's bullshit is what it is.
And we're going to fire this laser, which is photons in essence, and the photons are going to go through a barrier that has 2 openings in it. It's harder to see that, of course, mechanically, but trust me, there's a barrier with 2 openings. And we're going to take a look at the data that falls on a...
After it goes through a lens. Like say, I mean, this isn't the experiment. So again, just more deception. This is what you get. This is the pattern, and they have no explanation for any of these features. They have no explanation for the 2 patterns here. Nothing. Because they won't accept that it's all a surface phenomenon. The entire pattern, all of the fringe light, everything that way, is all created, okay, by photons that went by the surfaces. That's what the math demands the truth to be.
Detector screen, which in the modern age is...
The math proves it. If it was the center of the slit, if the wave was coming out of the center of the slit, then they'd use the math where the 2 centers of the wave is in their drawing. But they don't use that math because it doesn't work.
The more complicated and somewhat finicky piece of equipment. So we're all sitting here on spilkas, if you speak any Yiddish.
So, again, they always have to do some of these little kind of insider code, from the club. It's very annoying.
You know exactly what I'm talking about, right?
No, I don't know. I don't know what the fuck a spilka is, and I don't really, cabone, should I use Italian phrases, and then we can use some other kind of ethnic phrase? A whopperoni? What the fuck is all this crap? Keep it to yourself, fucker.
There, but hopefully this will work out. So Oman, why don't we just actually see ambient noise? Can we see a little bit of that first? So can we switch over to the input to the screen?
So they're doing all this. They have all this computer crap, all this crap to do the simplest of experiments. So damn dirt simple with a laser, and they can't even pull that off.
All right. So this is the output from that device. And
so it's just a photomultiplier looking into the slit experiment. So it's looking into the 2 slits. So all the light is, it's just light that's coming out of the 2 slits, going the same direction.
And now if we actually turn on the laser and allow us to collect all of the photons...
So the noise has dots in it, which is hilarious, right? So you already have a pattern in the noise. I mean, this is so bad. I mean, it's disgraceful that they get away with this shit.
...that land...
Here's to the moments that really matter.
The double shit.
Here's to living longer with Imbruvica.
Finding new...
God, that commercial was hilarious. So it's not chemotherapy, but it could give you cancer, and yes, it'll kill you, possibly through a heart attack, and, it's got all these other side effects, but yeah, it's not chemotherapy. It's so much better. I guess it just kills you better.
They're building up, and there you see what actually happens. So
this doesn't actually happen. This isn't what the Young experiment. Every way it's described is described as Young seeing the fringes. Okay, they're going out. Okay, beyond the center, not the ones inside the center. So this is not anything real in the sense that it doesn't even make sense, does it? It's black in the middle. It's black in the middle. Right? I mean, where's the consistency? It's supposed to be, a guaranteed, as Professor Lewin said, the center has to be an on because the 2 lines have to be the same length. Where's that here? Oh yeah, it's missing. So this is just such nonsense. To call this the double slit experiment, it's just such a cheat of the truth.
Result of this very device here, and you see it. We have you can see on the very far left, we see some of the photons are landing. Then we get a dark region in between, then a bright, a dark.
So, like I said, anybody who's really done these experiments knows the darks are much smaller. So again, this is using technology to look inside the two, look backwards into the needle, so to speak. And it's hardly the same experiment. You might as well call this the double slit. You can actually, I could probably get that to work on here, where you could actually see the little lines form between my fingers. Might even be possible. I should try that sometime. I know I've taken a picture of it and shown that before, but I mean, just do it with your computer screen. Just put your fingers close together, and you'll see the little lines form. That's what he's doing here. That's not the fringe pattern. That's inside that central maxima. He's looking inside of this. Here, he's looking inside of that. He's looking inside of these dots. That's what he's seeing here. That's what he's looking at. He's focused in on these 5 dots. And this is the fringe pattern out here. This is the fringe pattern.
Dark, a bright, a dark, a bright, a dark, and a bright, and a dark, even though this device over here really...
I think they have it off-centered, so that's why this one should be the center dot, I think. And obviously it should be 5 dots, not 4. The center maxima is always an odd number.
...is a barrier that has only 2 slits in it. So the animation that we showed you actually does hold true in real experience.
So they really could have done the experiment. The whole audience could have seen it. They could have shot a laser through the slits, put the big pattern on the screen. I mean, Professor Lewin's done it with a variable slit, and they could have varied the slit and shown you how, look, the wider I make it, the more bars there are, and the smaller I make the aperture, the fewer bars there are. Could have shown it honestly, and instead they choose to do it dishonestly. I mean, obviously they're choosing it to do it in this perverse way. So you have to, recognize that, ask yourself the question, why are they presenting it in this perverse way? And the obvious answer is because they want to perverse your understanding. They want to pervert the truth.
Experiments, and that then forces us to come to grips with it.
So forces us to believe in shit and nonsense.
Try to understand what in the heck is actually going on. So thank you all, Milan. So there we have it. We have this situation in which we expect to get 2 bands and we got more.
Barely. Yeah, right? Barely.
What does that tell us? Where do we go from there?
There's an existing bit of mathematics that comes up with exactly that same pattern. But it has nothing to do with particles. It's the mathematics that you use to describe waves, water waves.
So this is a lie, all right? It's just a lie because, I'll draw that part. Because, no, if you do the water wave thing, you have to do it from the wave centers. They don't use the distance between the surfaces. So when they're going to mathematically analyze water waves, okay, they don't pay any attention to surfaces. It doesn't matter. The only thing that's going to matter is the wave center, this distance. If they use something other than this distance, they won't accurately calculate where the on and offs are, where the wave pressure changes are. They have to use this distance. This distance is the distance they have to put in the math. When they're doing light experiments, it's this distance and this distance, not that distance. So this is another perversion, another lie, another distortion. The wave mechanics is different. And they're just, again, if I was to fairly describe where the wave sources have to be in the photon experiment, you'd have to put the waves here, and here, and here, and here. That's where the waves are, right on the surfaces. That's the math that'll get the right answer.
Waves or other kinds of waves.
Yeah, so can we see the animation that has a single? So this is a warm-up.
Yeah, this is stupid, right? So they're just proving the point. Water waves, no diffraction, no bars. So even the way they film this, they give it all kinds of nuance. But you drop a pebble in a stream, in a still pond, they're perfectly circular waves, no patterns, no diffraction patterns in the way the wave extends in space. So the water waves don't make a pattern with a single slit. Clearly the photons do. A clear, distinct, elaborate pattern. So another fake, phony, false comparison.
To the problem where we have water going.
Look at it. It's perfectly, not a single indication of any bands, no interference.
Through a single opening, and just tell us what we see.
So in photons, it's clear there's two sources. There are two waves that are being created in photons. And the two waves are right on the surface. So they're not waves. It's just scatter. Photons are being scattered on the surface, going to all locations, and you have a 50-50 chance of putting them back in phase. You're just breaking the photons, sending the pieces all across the surface, 50-50 chance putting them back in phase.
Happening here.
That's right. So you've got sort of a water wave, a wave front coming along, and then just that slit acts as a bit of a source for this rippling wave going out.
So none of this is actually, even though these waves are moving, this has nothing to do with a diffraction pattern, because obviously the diffraction pattern doesn't move in light. So it's not a diffraction pattern.
In a circular pattern, and you see it's most wavy at the place behind the slit, so the wall. I think that's indicated by the brightness there.
Yeah, and then if we...
So what a fake. So obviously they're cheating the experiment, because there was none of this. There was no pattern. Okay, no diffraction pattern.
Go on to a more relevant version for the actual double slit experiment.
Okay, and again, it doesn't have a double maxima, so it's glaring, right? You can see that. Do I really have to point it out over and over? No double maxima. Here in the center, nothing, oh, right here. No double maxima, nothing. Single. How come? How come it doesn't match the photons? Oh, that's right, because it's not making round waves going through the two surfaces. It's four sources. Do they show you the bits here, these little dots? Are they in here? No. Is it a real two-slit experiment? No. They have to make this infinitesimally small, and even if they do that in water waves, they're still not going to get they're still not going to get the right answer. These patterns will never match, because the water and the photons aren't doing the same thing. It's not the same mechanics. Photons aren't waving. It's not happening.
Yeah, so now we've got that same wavefront, but now there's two slits, and it's like there's two different sources of waves, like if you threw two different pebbles in the pond at the same time. And then what happens is that you're both creating waviness, but some places on the screen, the wave from one is doing this, and the wave from the other is doing this, and they kind of cancel out. But right there in the middle, what's happening is that the wave from the one slit is going up.
So right in the middle, again, is this, which is inside of 1 millimeter. So that's another just big lie. The central maxima part of it is a tiny 2 photons there in the middle. The rest of the pattern is being created by the fringe light, and the light that just went straight through, that didn't go near a surface. The light that goes straight through just goes straight through and hits the other side. And that's why in the photon experiment, the central node is much brighter than the subsequent ones.
Right when the wave from the other slit is going up, and then they do this, and you get a big wave, and that's the bright
So it has nothing to do with photons again.
part. But if you work out the mathematics, then the places that have the big waves are exactly these bright ones.
So, and if you work out the mathematics, so he said it again, referencing that somehow that math is the same math, when no, what you're going to sit there and use the math, what you're going to put in the math, the variables are completely different. It's the distance between the surfaces that matters in the photon experiment, not the center of the wave.
And that's just like we saw in the double slit, right, for the particles.
Right. So as Gerard was saying, as Marcus
Fake.
saying, we now have a strange confluence of two things. The data that comes out of the double slit experiment when done.
So is that the data? Is that the honest description of a very simple experiment? So again, you trust them when they can't honestly describe an experiment this simple.
With particles and something that seems to have nothing to do with it, where we just have waves going through a barrier with two openings. So the conclusion then is that there's some weird connection between particles and waves.
So there's no weird connection. It doesn't, the effects are completely different. The wave is being created because it's a medium. The water molecules are connected to each other. There's friction against the surfaces. It slows those molecules down. That's why you create a bulged wave going through and coming out of the water. There's no such thing in photons. Photons aren't connected to each other. It's made out of discrete momentum bits. And the fact is you can scatter them. There's lots of experiments that demonstrate you can scatter photons.
That's where that connection comes from. And let's push that further.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, let's just drive home how weird it should be that there is any kind of connection
Yes.
here. So imagine I do the two-slit experiment. I cover...
This will be terrible again, and it's just so bad because it's anyway. I cut off this side, and then I cut off this side, and if I cut off this side, that side's this side.
up one of the slits. The effect completely goes away.
So we know the effect doesn't completely go away. So that's the big joke, right? Because we know that's just the single slit experiment now. So if I take one of the slits away, I have the single slit experiment. I'm still going to get plenty of pattern. All right, no doubt about it. I'm just going to lose these little bars. I'm going to keep this big envelope.
I get a bit of spreading out of the particles, but I don't get that interference. I don't get those back.
So he just said you don't get it, right? So he just said with a single slit you don't get these bars, when of course you do. And I've done it where I've gotten like 70 of them. 70. So this is, you trust these people. They can't explain this simple little frickin' experiment right.
much as we saw with water going through
exactly,
a single
yeah,
opening.
exactly.
Yes, no, it's nothing like it. It doesn't happen. Any idiot can know it doesn't happen. Anybody who's actually done the experiment, actually done a single slit and then done a double slit and then done a triple slit, will see the actual results and how they evolve and change. They haven't even done it, obviously. Or they're just lying.
Exactly, much as you see with water going through the single slit, and much as you see as your classical intuition about...
So it has nothing. It's not anything like water. It doesn't have the same features as water. It's not even behaving the same as water. It just really isn't connected at all. The appearance is so loose. It's like calling a platypus a duck.
particles. If I cover up the
A scientist doesn't make that mistake.
other slit, exactly the same result. It's only if I have both slits open at the same time the effect happens. So it seems...
So again, and the effect is being destroyed because they make the slit so small that they turn the double slit into the two source experiment, because two of the sources, you can understand, if I bring the sources closer and closer, they're going to look like one source. I take two headlights and I move them really close together, just one headlight. So they turn the four source experiment into the two source experiment by making the slits so close that there's no wavelength of difference line you can draw. They can't interfere because there's no capacity for them to be a wavelength of difference away from each other.
seems to be for all the world as if somehow something's going through the first slit and something else is going through the other slit, and between them they're interacting to create this strange effect.
Yes, well that is actually what's happening because there's a lot of photons. For us to see something, you have to throw a lot of photons. You throw 10,000 and we get back 500. But anyway, it's probably enough of a video. Yeah. Yeah, I've made my point. I've shown that it's all lies, and now they're just going to talk about how they have to force us to believe in a bunch of wooey fake concepts to explain something so simple. It's just scatter at the surfaces. The math proves it's scatter at the surfaces. The patterns are just, it's so obvious. The little dots are being made by the biggest distance. Lots of wavelengths fit there. Lots of triangles where there's a wavelength of difference. The little narrow distance, yes, there's only a few wavelengths where there's a difference. That creates this pattern, and the two patterns are just sitting on top of each other. When you bring two single slit experiments together, two that are making this big bar pattern, when you bring them together, you're not bringing this distance and this distance together. You're bringing this distance together. So now you don't have two of these. You have one of this and one of this. These are the point sources. The outside surfaces is what changes this and this into this. This is the game changer. Alright, that's enough stated. Alright, enough of a video. It's just despicable that they get away with this crap. There's not a single scientist, not a single physicist who can say that was crap. That was a crappy explanation, a crappy description. It was completely off the subject even. It was so far removed from the truth. Why are they selling our quantum mechanics premised on so many distortions and perversions? Why do they have to resort to distortions and perversions? Is the theory really that bad? Yeah, it is. It really is that bad. Alright. Till the next time and such. God, I hate this planet.